Welcome to the Salt and Mirrors and Cats podcast, interviews and audio dramas from our literary zine with stories, poems, and art about superstitions. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final episode of the Salt and Mirrors and Cats podcast. I am your host, Kerria Seabrooke. It was a pleasure to bring you the tales of superstition and exclusive interviews with our team members, along with our 4 guest writers that participated in our zine. In today's episode, we'll hear from our 4th and final guest, Willow Winsham, and her essay, Written in the Stars, read by myself, Kerria Seabrooke. Joanna spoke to Willow about her work as a folklorist and her experiences with superstition.
Welcome to the podcast, Willow. Thank you so much for being a guest writer with Salt and Mirrors and Cats. We are so happy that you participated in our project. Could you tell us more about what the word superstition means to you?
Well, according to a dictionary definition, superstition is a widely held but irrational belief in supernatural influences, especially as leading to good or bad luck or a practice based on such a belief. Another similar definition is a belief or way of behaving that is based on fear of the unknown and faith in magic or luck, a belief that certain events or things will bring good or bad luck. So, stripped down to basics, superstition essentially means those instances where we think that if we do or don't do a particular action or say or don't say a particular thing, then something good or bad will happen as a direct result. The word superstition very often comes with negative connotations and associations. There's often a strong suggestion that superstition is bad, old-fashioned, only believed by the uneducated and the gullible. It's often been used as a divisive term, encouraging an us and them mentality, with whoever is labelled as superstitious or believing in superstition being easily discredited. Especially today, there's a tendency to believe the idea that in our modern advanced lives we are beyond the superstitious past where people believed in such things. But when you scratch the surface of our beliefs and behaviours today, however, just below that surface, there's evidence that it's really quickly apparent that superstition is still really alive and well today. Personally, I'm fascinated by what has counted as superstition over the years and what that can tell us about what makes people tick. Exploring what people count as superstitious or the superstitions they follow can tell us a lot about what matters to people and a society as a whole. It shows our deepest fears, wants and beliefs, whether that's today or 300 or 500 years ago.
Are there any particular superstitions that you believe in?
I'm sure there are dozens of superstitions that I follow without thinking, just automatically, almost as a force of habit. But the main one that stands out as one that I really am aware that I follow almost religiously is touch wood. It's one that my mum always did when I was a child and continues to do till this day. I picked it up from her and it's totally ingrained in me now. We also follow the idea that if there's no wood to hand, then you touch your own head and say touch wood instead. So if I say something like, the weather's been good so far this week, I'll add, "Ooh, touch wood," straight away, as if I've tempted fate by saying something positive, and the touching wood removes the potential for the bad luck to come. I know it's utterly irrational, but will I stop doing it? No, not a chance. Another one that I don't follow now, but definitely did as a child, was avoiding walking over 3 drains together. I didn't know why. It was just what you did, or rather what you didn't do, and there was a definite idea that it would bring bad luck if you walked over those 3 drains together. There were 3 in particular that we used to pass every day on the walk down to the school bus, and without fail walk around the other side of it rather than walking straight across. Walking on the cracks in pavement was also a similar one to be avoided, though I was an adult when I heard the popular step on a crack, break your mother's back superstition for the first time, and all the different variants that go with that.
As superstition can be highly related to place, could you tell us more about the superstitions in your local area?
One superstition that my children have leapt on and adopted is find a penny, pick it up. Funnily enough, they're all avid penny finders and they're remarkably good at it. Though what they do with them when they find the penny varies. Both my sons state that you have to keep the penny to have the good luck, whereas my daughter believes that passing it on to someone else or leaving it for someone else to find is essential in the luck building process. I know a lot of people are almost religious in their avoidance of ladders, and I do tend to avoid walking under them, but mostly from a practical safety perspective rather than a superstitious one. I confess I have, however, on several occasions walked under a ladder, but that was only when it was the safest of two options and preferable to stepping out onto the road. Do I really believe that bad or good luck will come from them? I really don't know. I do know there's a comfort in those rituals and a feeling of a link, of a connection with people who I share them with. And I think that a lot of us probably have those superstitions that we follow out of habit, out of comfort, just because that's what we've always done or what our family and friends have always done.
Do you have any other superstitions you're fond of that weren't covered by your essay?
When it comes to favourite superstitions not covered in my essay, well, in general, I tend to prefer superstitions that promise good luck rather than bad, for obvious reasons. There are far too many superstitions out there for me to choose just one favourite, but I do really like the various superstitions about cats predicting the weather. I always keep a close eye on how we've got 2 British short hairs, I always keep a close eye on how they're behaving, just in case. There are lots of ways that a cat is said to predict the weather, but one popular idea is that a cat washing its ears is said to mean rain, and generally speaking, an agitated cat means bad weather is on its way. While researching Magpies and Red Skies, my recent book looking at the origins of 100 popular superstitions, there were a couple of superstitions that I hadn't heard of before and that really intrigued me. One of those was finding a fly in your drink. Now, I would have thought that finding a fly in your drink would be really bad luck, but it's actually considered the opposite, and a fly ending up in your drink is meant to bring good luck. Though whether you drink the drink afterwards is probably down to individual taste. As with many superstitions, variations exist. For instance, there's an idea that the fly needs to be completely submerged in the drink because some say that one of the fly's wings hold a disease, while the other holds the antidote. And as you don't know which wing is which, by dunking both, all possibilities are covered. Although a fly in drink is good luck, finding a fly in your inkstand was thought to be bad luck.
Can you tell us more about the inspiration behind your piece?
One of my favourite sections to write in Treasury of Folklore Stars and Skies was the section on star-related superstitions, so it was a natural choice of topic for my essay. It was fascinating to research and write and to look at all the different star superstitions across the globe, so many of them that I hadn't actually heard of before. But the similarities and themes found across so many places and cultures and societies really brought home the unifying nature of folklore and how much we share in common with each other across time and place. It was just so interesting to find the same basic ideas behind many of the superstitions being the same, although thousands of miles apart. In particular, I found really interesting the range of superstitions to do with pointing at stars, as they tap into a wider general folkloric taboo against pointing at celestial bodies and the ingrained belief in many societies that pointing in general is undesirable. It's not just stars you have to watch out for, by the way. Pointing at rainbows or the moon can also be a bad idea, and there are many, many terrible outcomes that await those who do so. From all of the ones I've found, the very best you can hope for is that your finger might fall off. A lot of them are a lot worse.
We'd love to hear about your other projects. What are you working on at the moment?
The main one is the provisionally titled The Story of Witches, another book for Batsford Books, which is really exciting as it's great to be back writing about witch history and folklore again, as that is my primary passion. I've really missed it, so it's great to be back writing about witches again. The book is basically looking at the idea of what a witch is and the many different ways witches have been portrayed and the beliefs about those said to be witches throughout history. But I'm not looking just at the witch trials, but also witches in folklore in general, across mythology, superstition, fairy tales. The list goes on. It's been really nice to also engage with more modern subject material as well this time, looking at the development of Wicca and modern witchcraft and beliefs today. I'm really excited to share it with everyone when the time comes for this book to be published.
One of your latest books is titled Magpies and Red Skies, The Enchanting Origins of 100 Superstitions. This is a subject we are naturally very interested in. What awakened your interest in superstitions?
Superstitions have always been one of my favourite types of folklore. So when I was approached by Welbeck Publishing with the idea for Magpies and Red Skies, it was really exciting to be able to accept it. I thought I knew a lot about superstitions before I started that project, but there were so many new ones that I found in my research that I'd just never come across before. The main difficulty, to be honest, was narrowing it down to just 100. I've already touched on one of my favourites, but there were others that really piqued my interest through the research process. It's like once you start digging and finding all these strange and fabulous superstitions, you just want to keep on going and going and going. One of the other strangest ones I included in the book was the idea that taking bananas on a boat is unlucky. I'd never heard of this before and thought when I first came across it that it was one of those superstitions likely to be one of the, lesser popular superstitions, a little bit niche. But no, apparently it's actually quite a prevalent belief, particularly in boating and fishing communities and groups, in particular across the United States, Turkey and Australia and quite a few other places. No one knows exactly where this belief came from, but there are several ideas and theories about how bananas on boats became associated with bad luck. One suggestion is that after a boat or a ship went down, if it was carrying bananas, they were one of the things that would remain floating on the water and thus became linked in the general imagination with shipwrecks and disasters. Or there's another suggestion that because of the perishable nature of bananas, if you're carrying them on board, there's no time to stop and fish, otherwise they'd go off. And that was bad luck because, you just couldn't fish that day. Even today, having bananas on board is still believed to mean that fishing will be unlucky and no fish will be caught. Some companies flat out ban having bananas on board, and even in some cases ban having any images or anything associated with them. One superstition, another one that makes me particularly squeamish, is the idea that when a tooth falls out or is taken out, it needs to be disposed of. Everything to do with teeth makes me feel a bit icky, and this piece of law is no exception. One of the main methods of disposal suggested is to burn the tooth. If it wasn't burned, it was believed that if an animal found the tooth and ate it, then the new tooth that grew in your mouth would be an animal tooth instead. Another reason why it was considered important to burn teeth was that it was believed if a witch got hold of the discarded tooth, then they would have power over you, their new victim. Some advocated burying teeth instead of burning them, and in Devon there was the less extreme option of just hiding the discarded tooth, but you had to make sure it was hidden really, really well, just in case.
Two of your other books are England's Witchcraft Trials and Accused British Witches Throughout History. What are your thoughts on superstition in relation to witchcraft trials?
Superstition definitely played a big role in witchcraft accusations, and through trial documents and accounts we actually learn a lot about the superstitions and folklore and beliefs people had about witches from the 15th and 16th centuries onwards. It's hugely fascinating and again really highlights how superstition played an integral part in everyday life. I've already touched on the fact that it was said you should dispose of teeth when they've fallen out so that a witch didn't get hold of them and get power over you. This belief was part of a wider belief regarding witches and the hold they were believed to have on their victims and sympathetic magic in general. Basically, it was believed that if a witch got hold of something that belonged to you, especially something from your body, so hair cuttings, teeth, nail clippings, etc., that it would forge a connection between the witch and the person, which meant the witch would be able to gain power over you and torment you further. Another belief that certain metals, in particular iron, are lucky and offers protection against witchcraft was also evident in the way people suspected of being witches were treated. We're all probably familiar with the idea of hanging a horseshoe for good luck and protection, and I've mentioned already the practice of putting something made of iron under the milk churn. It's particularly striking after legislation was passed in the 18th century, essentially saying that witchcraft and witches didn't exist anymore. Just because the law denied witches didn't mean that centuries of witch belief and fear just vanished overnight. People turned instead to superstition and took matters into their own hands when it came to protecting themselves against what they still felt was a very real threat. You hear throughout the 19th century and even well into the 20th century cases of suspected witches being accosted and scratched with a pin or an iron implement in the belief that this would break the power the witch held over their victim. Driving an iron nail into a witch's footprint was also a popular action that was taken when someone suspected someone else of bewitching them. There are lots of superstitions about how to break the power of a witch, a lot of which involve iron and some other metals, which really highlight that witches and being bewitched was something that played on people's minds and that they took really seriously. Superstition could play into accusations of witchcraft in other ways too. For instance, it was often believed that people who looked a certain way or behaved a certain way were bad luck. Therefore, anyone with these attributes had the odds stacked further against them and might be more likely to be accused, especially if coupled with local disagreements, an altercation with a neighbour, illness, a variety of other things stacking up. How you looked could also tip the balance. There were certain behaviours and beliefs that were considered linked to witches, and when someone in turn displayed them, it could make them vulnerable or more vulnerable to accusation, or were used as further evidence and justification for persecution and prosecution. For instance, being seen collecting dew, especially at night or in the early morning, was seen as suspect, as there was a belief that doing so was a way of transferring the milk from someone's herd to your own, a very common accusation against witches. In this form of sympathetic magic, the collecting of the dew itself represented the milk, and by collecting it, it became yours. The link between cats and witches is also, again, something that is highlighted in various superstitions. Of all the animals associated with witches, cats come top of the list. Witches were said to have familiar spirits that did their bidding, and these were often in the form of cats. Cats were the right at the top of the list of the different forms that a familiar was said to take. Witches were also said to often be good at shape-shifting, and in many tales or accounts, a witch is said to have been seen to have changed into a cat. This in turn then fed some of the superstitions surrounding cats and witches and added to the belief of both of them being unlucky, and feeding on each other to make various other superstitions about both things.
It was such an incredible honour to speak to you today, Willow. We're down to our last question. What do you think superstitions can tell us about the past and about the people who believed in them?
I think really the main thing that superstition can tell us about the past is what was considered important to people at any given time. Superstitions tend to build up around matters that are relevant and important to people, and that is really reflected clearly in the sorts of superstitions that develop. Exploring the superstitions held in a given time or place in particular shows us what people feared and valued most, what was important on a day-to-day basis. Superstitions regarding protection against witches highlights the very, very real fear against them, while superstitions aimed at protecting crops or cattle reflects the vital place they played in the livelihoods of those communities. Examining superstitions and their origins can therefore give us a window into the past and a little more understanding of the everyday lives and beliefs of people who were ultimately not very unlike us in many ways. As I touched on earlier, there's also this real danger of portraying people in the past as being gullible and uneducated and believing in anything and everything, while imagining that we're here in the present being all enlightened and above all that. But really, superstition pervades so many aspects of our lives, even today, in a way that's become so ingrained in our cultures and societies that we're not even really consciously aware of it most of the time. For instance, think about the road that you live on or the building that you live in. Is there a number 13? I didn't notice for years that the close we lived on didn't have a house number 13. It went straight from 12 to 14. But after doing some digging, it turns out that leaving that number out has been common practice in many areas due to the fact that 13 is considered to be such an unlucky number. Blocks of flats, for instance, will sometimes avoid that number or not have a 13th floor. Whereas in China and Japan, it's the number 4 that's considered deeply unlucky. And again, it has such negative associations that hotels and apartment blocks will often not have a room 4 or a floor 4. In South Korea, hospitals and other public buildings leave out rooms with 4 in. And in Singapore, some public transport companies don't include the number 4 in their registration plates. Really, if we're honest, this is no more or less illogical or irrational than someone in the past decorating their barn with flowers to ward off evil, or placing a horseshoe under the milk churn to protect the milk from being stolen by witches. I think ultimately what superstition highlights about the past is that people then were very much like people today. We all have our fears, our uncertainties, the things we do and believe that might seem irrational and groundless, but really stem from deep within our individual core and collective psyches. And I find that so utterly fascinating. And I think it's one of the major reasons that, for me, superstitions are so fascinating, but also so important to study, so we can remember and continue to forge those links with the past and not think we're in this isolated bubble.
Written in the Stars by Willow Winsham, dedicated to the memory of Melanie Warren, a true star in the folklore community. Stars have twinkled brightly in cloudless skies above our heads for millennia. We have steered by them, sown and harvested according to their positions, and used them to explain countless aspects of our wonderful, often confusing world. It is only natural, then, that they have been the focus of many a superstition over the centuries, and continue to be so today. Stars, unlike other heavenly bodies, demand respect, and woe betide anyone who thinks otherwise. Although it might be tempting to do so, superstition dictates that you should never point at a star. This popular belief, along with the taboo against pointing at the moon or a rainbow, is often said to be linked to the importance placed on stars in the ancient world. According to this idea, the stars were seen as deities, and, as anyone with an interest in mythology will know, gods were not always known for their sense of humor. Pointing implied disrespect, and ran the risk of causing these volatile deities displeasure, bringing down the full weight of their wrath on the head of the rash pointer. Potential consequences of pointing at a star are said to range from pain, a rotting finger, or, in extreme cases, a finger falling off altogether. If you accidentally find yourself pointing at a star, however, all is not lost. According to belief in Germany, get in there first and just bite the finger you pointed with. The star then won't bite it for you, and you'll avoid losing the offending digit. When it comes to stars, any form of disrespect should be avoided. Laughing at a falling star was literally playing with fire. In Belarus, it was believed that the star would be so angered it would burn down your house. Another taboo when it comes to stars is counting them. However tempted you might be, it's generally not seen as a good idea, as, according to superstition, you might drop down dead. Despite, or no doubt because of this prohibition, a popular pastime for children in the 19th century Derbyshire was to dare each other to count the stars they could see. There was one catch. If they reached 100, it was said that the counter would die. Would you dare go past 99? Starlight, star bright, first star I've seen tonight. I wish I may, wish I might, have the wish I wish tonight. The practice of wishing on a star is ingrained into many of us from the moment we are old enough to understand this popular rhyme, and stars have long been linked to the longing for fulfillment of our deepest desires. Just look upwards as the sky darkens and wait for the first star you can see, and then make a wish, making sure to keep it a secret. A simple enough concept, but as always, where folklore and superstition are concerned, there are certain conditions attached. Some say that you must quickly look away after making the wish, and don't look back at the star again until you've seen a certain number of other stars afterwards. Another belief is that once you've made a wish, make sure not to speak until you've blown a kiss to 3 other stars in the sky. If you wish on a shooting star, be quick. The wish will only come true if you finish making it before the star finishes falling. Leave it too long, and your wish is doomed not to come true. Although generally prohibited, there are times when counting stars is seen as positive. Some say that you should count a certain number of stars before making a wish. Counting 9 stars before 9 nights in a row was a popular choice in the mid-20th century in Swansea, Wales. Another superstition states that if you count 7 stars for 7 nights in a row, the next person you shake hands with will be your future partner or spouse. Falling or shooting stars have long been seen as portents of disaster, heralding tragedy and death. It is said to be especially bad luck to witness one when sitting at a sick bed. It's believed to signal that the person will die soon. However much you might be tempted, on some dates you would do best to avoid looking at a shooting star. In Belarus, it was believed that doing so on the 5th of February would mean a death would occur soon, and there was a similar belief in Russia regarding March 5th. If you see a falling star in Ukraine, some believed you should say Amen 3 times. Failing to do so would leave it free to transform itself into a devil that would bring harm to those nearby. Shooting stars or fireballs as malevolent dragon-like creatures is a popular motif found in several cultures. In Russia, known as zmej, they were said to target women pining or grieving for their menfolk. Often linked to evil magic, they were also said to be a flying sorcerer or witch. The Romanian zmej was known for lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce on those wandering alone in the night. The Lithuanian meteor dragon, the Aidaveras, was actually benevolent, said to bring good fortune to the family it was associated with. One of the most poignant and enduring pieces of star lore is that connecting stars with human souls. A common belief today is that a star in the sky is a departed loved one looking down on us, the idea bringing comfort to those left behind. This idea connected to the long-standing belief that everyone was assigned a star at birth, that each star represents a human soul. In many places, a falling or shooting star, caused by minute specks of space dust burning up as they enter the Earth's atmosphere, was said to mark the death of the person it belonged to. A star falling downward is a soul coming to Earth to start its life, whereas one passing upward is a soul returning to the heavens, their life over. In some locations, if the star is seen to fall toward the left or in a jagged fashion, then it is a sign that the departed person had a wicked soul or lived an unkind life. If it fell in a straight line, then the person had been honest and good. A star with a tail would signify the death of a wealthy person, whereas a smaller, simple star belonged to a person less materially fortunate. According to belief in Belarus, a falling star marked a soul returning to Earth to put things right that had been wrong in their previous life. In Romania, stars were believed to be the souls of children not baptized. To help those souls on their way, it was important to cross yourself when you saw one. Another belief from Romania says that shooting stars are angels flying to help someone in need, whereas in Estonia, it is believed that shooting stars were really an ancient demon tossing his hot stones up into the sky. Falling stars can be helpful for health conditions and were believed to be particularly useful when it came to skin conditions such as acne. According to Marcellus of Bordeaux, Writing in 350 BCE, the sufferer should wipe a cloth over their spots when they saw a shooting star. The spots would be transferred to a cloth, leaving the face clear. Be careful, though. If you touch your spots with your hand, then they will be transferred there instead. Did you know that stars can also predict the weather? Wrap up warm if you see a falling star. In many countries, this is believed to mean windy weather will follow. So the next time you are outside at night, spare a moment to glance up at the stars. Whether a passing soul, a dragon, or a portent of bad weather, they represent millennia of shared belief that the stars hold sway over those of us down below, both past, present, and future. Will you make a wish tonight? Thank you for listening to this season of the Salt and Mirrors and Cats podcast. The essay you heard today was Written in the Stars by Willow Winsham, narrated by myself, Kerria Seabrooke. On behalf of Willow, we would like to dedicate this episode to the memory of Melanie Warren, a true star in the folklore community. Please see the links in our show notes to read more from Willow. Salt and Mirrors and Cats. We'll share the good luck.